If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. If you're going to cover a great song, you better bring it. That's a good cover. Travolta's straight up at 10 o'clock. Welcome to the Mornings with Ed show on the all-new Voice of Laguna. An absolutely spectacular fall morning here along the Southern California coastline. I hope wherever you happen to be listening from, it's equally stunning for you and that you have a magnificent day and a magnificent Election Tuesday tomorrow. One of the reasons we timed this conversation out was because of the election tomorrow. And I welcome, you've met her before, she's been here before. Professor Melissa Harris is a professor of psychology who's a leading happiness facilitator at Juniper Consulting Lab here in Laguna Beach. She practices a comprehensive approach to healing where they use proven research to promote balance and well-being in our lives. She has helped thousands of people find their sweet spot in life. This segment in particular for the radio is an important segment, and each conversation seems to be more fascinating than the last. In for the conversation today, we welcome back to the program Professor Melissa Harris. Welcome, Melissa. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, Ed.
Thank you for being here. And what we normally cover, and we've covered different subjects on different days, and what you do is happiness, essentially. Yes. You're a happiness consultant.
Yes.
And the subject matter that I've selected for today is less than that, and I appreciate your indulgence for that as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, so I'll let you introduce what you asked that we speak about.
Okay, yes. Because of the election tomorrow, and I don't want to put you in a tough spot politically or anything like that, but I do have some important questions about narcissism. Let's start with narcissism first.
Okay.
And the difference between, is there a difference between regular narcissism and malignant narcissism?
Yes, there is a difference. There are typically 4 categories of narcissism that we focus on, and malignant is the most damaging for people around the narcissistic person.
Right.
I do have to say for our listeners, when you said, can we talk about narcissism, do you remember what my response was?
What, to remind me?
I said, yeah, as long as we start out with not everybody's ex is a narcissist.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And one of the issues that we have in the field of psychology that maybe you don't encounter in the area of physics, for example, is that we really have a diluted vocabulary when it comes to the words that we use to diagnose and help people. And so the word narcissist has been kicked around. I mean, if you go on BuzzFeed, you're going to see 6 ways to know that your partner's a narcissist, or 3 ways that you know that your ex was really, and in a way it's great because we're having conversations, but in another way it's very not helpful because people who are actually dealing with a narcissist that is of the diagnosable criteria,
right,
it's much different than when you have a disagreement with your partner and you go, well, they don't see it my way, they're a narcissist.
Right.
And so the language that we use becomes very important and very convoluted because of the way that we toss it around in pop culture and in our communities. Right. But when we're looking at actual diagnostic statistical manual, the 5th edition, you'll want the criteria for a narcissist. The 4 kinds, there's this underrooted seed of really being quite fragile and not having a sense of worthiness, which when we think of narcissists, we think, oh, they come across as so important and
right,
they think that they're a god,
they
right?
Have too much confidence.
Right, but it's actually the opposite. And what it is that because your worthiness doesn't come from the inside, you have to seek it on the outside. And as we know, life is constantly changing, it's transitioning. So seeking for that validation from the outside is exhausting. It's never going to be complete. You're going to need the next pretty 20-year-old girlfriend or boyfriend, the next political spot, the next
Right.
whatever it is, it's got to get bigger and more because you're continuously trying to feed this deficit.
Do they need to feel persecuted? Is there
There's different kinds.
Okay.
So one of the things that you asked about was like the Jesus complex, right?
Right.
And that's not actually something that we diagnose. It's something that is more of a common phrase that's been thrown around. And that part, there's often that piece of persecution.
Let me take a left turn here
Okay.
and explain to the audience exactly what I mean. There's a gentleman who walks by the studio almost on a daily basis and fancies himself Christ.
Okay.
He's got. I couldn't begin to diagnose the amount of issues or what they are individual. I don't know, but I know that he fancies himself as the return of the Savior, Christ.
How does that show up? Because it can actually be, not something that's dangerous. If you're out thinking you need to kill people and wipe people out, that's a little more dangerous, right?
Right.
But
I don't find him like that. More than likely, he gives messages of love.
okay, then there you go. That's not the worst.
And also indicates on occasion that he is Christ.
Okay.
And I can't put it any other way. He actually has said it.
Okay.
So I'm curious as to. I don't believe that's I don't think that falls into narcissism. Not so much. What
It can be part of other diagnoses. And one of the things that, because I did say, it can show up in different ways.
Right.
I just want to point out how common having mental health illness or conditions are. So 1 in 5 adults in the last year experienced some form.
Okay.
That's a lot. That we all know 5 people, right? And so the ones that typically get the visibility, that get the spotlight, are the ones that are malaligned with our communities. And that's not a great thing. In fact, it's heartbreaking to me because when you look at so many, even with the Jesus complex, they're not likely to go out and hurt anyone. And I think about, families, in particular parents, if you have a child that has a mental health condition and disability, how different that feels than if you have a kid that, say, has childhood cancer. You say, my kid has cancer, the whole community rallies, you have love and support. You say, my kid is schizophrenic, and everybody runs away. And there are so many gifts that are inherent to having a brain and biology and physiology that work different. And so we really don't talk about that much because what gets the press are the people who are very, very much the minority that show up in very unhealthy ways that are harmful. When you look at so many of even the musicians that you play on your radio station that have diagnoses, and they probably wouldn't be as magnificent without those differences in their brain and how they work and how they see the world.
Right. Beautifully stated, and thank you. And the last thing I'll say about the gentleman with the Jesus complex, quite judgmental. He's quite judgmental, man.
I mean, maybe he's the New Testament, Old Testament instead of New Testament, so.
And I do want to talk about schizophrenia in more detail in a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. You can throw anything.
And I'm curious about kind of staying on the narcissist line here. Is there a difference between a narcissist and a sociopath?
Yes. And sometimes, we see these overlaps, and that's why when you look at the diagnoses, it becomes important to really look at the criteria for each one. Right. With narcissism, it's usually not part of antisocial personality disorder. Okay. And we see that sociopath and psychopath, that's in that category. So it's actually a little bit different of criteria. We do see that with the malignant narcissism that there really is a lack of empathy, and so there's similarities there. Right. There's not a lot of compassion. You can't put yourself in another person's shoes. And, when we think about where people fit in the world,
Right.
you might be drawn to like a CEO or a high power position if that is your struggle in life, because it reinforces all of the things that you are strong at. Because if you have to fire somebody on the daily,
Right.
not having that empathy is actually going to be a strength versus, if you and I were put to task to tell people that they no longer had a job, we probably wouldn't sleep well.
Right.
And so, there are places where this actually aligns very well with people's positions that they seek out. But that lack of empathy is really the common factor there, or one of them.
And what's missing what's missing that makes someone lack empathy? What is it that how does that happen?
I love when you ask these questions and I'm like, well, it's very complicated, but that is such a common thing to say when we're looking at why things show up the way they do
Right.
in humans, right? And so we know that there is a genetic component. So if your parents are a narcissist, you're more likely to be a narcissist, even if you were adopted out. And so we do know that there's some sort of genetic component there. We know that there's an environmental component. We live in a world that is very individualistic, that we tell people they are special and unique and important, and we are not a team in so many ways, right? And so that message plays into it. We know that extremes in parenting or the way that you were raised plays into it. So if you're overindulged and told that you're a god, then you might actually internalize it and believe it. Or the converse, if you're told you're a complete piece of crap,
Right.
then you don't have that worthiness and you're constantly seeking to feed that.
Right.
And so it is a very complicated, question
Right.
that I can't give you
That's okay.
a one-liner for.
That's okay.
But it is very fascinating because even within similar families that are raised the same, you have one that turns out entirely narcissistic, another one that doesn't,
Right.
or that lacks empathy. We do know that you can cultivate empathy and that it's not, there's not necessarily a critical period, but it is really good to do with children. And that's a nice time to start.
So it is possible to cultivate empathy
Right.
starting young.
Yeah, and we really do that by seeing ourselves in others and by practicing that. And we were talking a little bit before, but one of the things that I did this last week was I helped transition somebody that's so dear to my heart, my Uncle Mike. I grew up living in the same house. He was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia in his early 20s, which is a pretty common age for men to be diagnosed. He also has disabilities. And so I helped transition him. And he was in a more independent living situation. He's now in a full care nursing facility. I knew this was going to be hard for him because he didn't see himself in the others, in the people that he was going to be having his room next to.
Right.
And that's a hard feeling, right? To
Right.
not feel like you belong somewhere. And so I had an 1.5-hour drive from his old apartment to his new nursing home. And I really was like, I gotta make this time count.
Right.
So we were talking about the research of us and them. And when we are in an us and them instead of a we mindset, we are in our limbic brain. We are in our fight flight. We are in, this person might hurt me. They politically think different than me, so they're an enemy. Like, that is something that we're seeing a lot of right now.
Right.
Is people walking around on the day before election in that limbic brain,
Right.
going, this is how you're different than me. And as long as we do that, we stay in that limbic brain. But if we start as children and we work on it, flexing those muscles as we're adults and we continue to evolve and have bigger, more tender, compassionate hearts,
Right.
then we can see a we. And the second we go into this we mode, where here's all the ways that you are like me, then we're functioning from our whole brain. We're back to having that frontal cortex where we have our logic, our thought, our compassion, our kindness. All of those come back to us. And so I shared with my Uncle Mike, one of my clips that I used to show in every relationship class, and it's from the mockumentary Best in Show. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't.
It's old. But there's this scene where there's this young, curvy woman, and she's married to this 90-year-old, and he's blinking heavily, and they're really playing up the fact that he is a senior citizen,
Right.
and they're just a weird match.
Right.
And she's explaining in this mockumentary why they are such a great fit.
Okay.
And she says, well, I like soup, and he likes soup. And that statement is what I anchor onto the second I find myself going limbic brain when I'm in a heated political discussion or talking to somebody that has wildly different religious views, or, just seems on the split bias interpretation that they are not like me. I just anchor myself with that one line: I like soup, they like soup. And then I can start to break that down and be open to the ways that we are similar. So I told my Uncle Mike that, and took him to the nursing home. I could see that he was really feeling like this wasn't his place where he belonged.
Right.
And he was very, very brave. I mean, so brave, and more open than I expected him to be. And the next day I took him out for pizza, and I was chatting with him, and I was like, so what do you think? And he goes, there's a lot of people in there that like soup. And I went, yes, that's it. Because the second we can see the we, whether it's in a person
Right.
that is far spectrum narcissist, right? We all have those tendencies and those characteristics. If we are talking about people that are wildly different, if we can see our common humanity, and some of us have the advantage of having that built from when we're children,
Right.
and others of us, it has to be almost like going to a mental gym where you are flexing those muscles daily, and right now is the perfect time to check out those muscles.
Right.
Tomorrow's going to be interesting, and
Right.
if we can show up with a compassion and non-judgment,
Yeah.
then that's going to serve everyone.
I think more so the day after tomorrow will be interesting. It'll be the most interesting.
Right, for sure.
And my heart goes out to you and your Uncle Mike, and I really wish him all the best.
Thank you.
and-
Growing up with him, I learned a lot about people's perception of mental illness and mental conditions, and people would be so surprised that I had such a positive, happy experience.
Right.
And again, we get such distorted messages. My Uncle Mike is more likely to hurt himself than anyone else.
Right.
And he's less likely to hurt somebody else than the general non-diagnosed population. And so we have these ideas from horror movies and from
Right.
6 o'clock news that are just wildly inaccurate. And it's a huge disservice when we are trying to flex those we muscles,
Right.
when we're guarded and filled with fear.
Right. Are you still concerned that he might hurt himself?
No, not.
Okay.
He's been pretty stable for a long time, but
Okay.
I think that when you love somebody that is struggling, there's always in the back of the mind. I try not to worry. What is that? Like, it's sending out a prayer for the thing you don't want.
Right.
I try not to worry.
Okay.
Try being the key word.
Okay.
But he's doing so well. And the fact that he can look at everybody and say, hey, I like soup, you like soup, that's a strong foundation.
That is. All right. Well, I want to go back to the sociopath for a moment, if I could, and something that just kind of shocked me in reading about it. I know that when you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, you can get treatment for it. You can get help for it.
Mm-hmm.
There is help
Yes.
for the schizophrenic. However, the sociopath who's some of the symptoms include blaming others for their problems, breaking the law repeatedly, behaving irresponsibly, intimidating or threatening to maintain control. There is no known cure
Yeah,
for
same with
that.
narcissism. Yeah.
That's shocking, and even therapy. That's a lost cause. Is that a lost cause once someone's been diagnosed as a sociopath?
I mean, who are you talking to? Do I ever think
no,
anything?
you never do. That's right.
I think there is beauty in every expression of human life.
Right.
And so, do I think it's a lost cause? No. Do I think that there are exceptional challenges for that person and for the people that love them and that share daily time with them? Absolutely. And I think one of the hard things is that this isn't something you can go in with optimism saying it's going to get better. You have to go in being very realistic and accepting things where they are. And so, you can't really, like you said, you can't really fix it.
Right.
There's not a medication that we know that solves this.
Right.
I think one of the reasons why...
Or even a tweaking of thoughts, you know. Therapy usually helps those that seek it out.
Yeah, but with the antisocial personality disorders,
Right.
it is exceptionally hard to find anything that really sticks.
Where does borderline personality disorder fit into all of this?
So borderline personality disorder is another one that is really hard to treat. The biggest thing with that is finding places where these people are safe and where they can function. And sometimes I think, we get so hung up on diagnosing people. And if you are a therapist, a doctor, that's important. We want to have this unified approach to treatment and care.
Right.
But if we're just, common humans, maybe looking at where does this person fit best is a better approach than trying to diagnose and label. Where are they going to function?
Right.
Where is it that they're not going to hurt others? Because we know when we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. And so having that kind of approach of, maybe they shouldn't be a preschool teacher, but they're going to be okay in this situation.
And I read that they have a higher risk of suicide and self-destructive behavior.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, when it's rooted in other people hating you and you hating yourself,
Right.
that's a really dark place to be.
Right.
And then you add on all of the cultural narratives of fear and hate and prejudice around that. Nobody shows up with flowers and support if
Right.
you have somebody in the family that's diagnosed with that. It's fear.
Right.
And there's so much fear around it. We don't really talk about it in a healthy way.
And as I mentioned, I do want to talk more, a little more deeply about schizophrenia in a second. But the first three things I mentioned, the narcissist, the sociopath, and borderline personality disorder, as well as schizophrenia, are there cases of one individual having all four conditions?
Oh, geez. I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out in our beautiful human species. But when we look at diagnoses, usually if if you have, for instance, one, then it might preclude you from getting another diagnosis. But you could have symptoms that show up in all.
Right. And do cult leaders display parts of all of these conditions?
Parts of all of them. If you are a cult leader, it might fall under the delusions of grandeur. And when you have that, then there can be, the very dysfunctional and dark side of that as well. And I think that's where we can go about it very compassionately. But when I say go about it compassionately, it doesn't mean you invite them to live at your house.
Right.
It's you say this is where you can do the least amount of harm.
Right. So someone who starts off as a narcissist or a sociopath, and then all of a sudden tallies up 50 million followers on Twitter, they have that then feeling of self-importance as a cult leader.
And it reinforces all of those things
Right.
that they're looking for to be reinforced.
Right. Well, let's talk about the type of person that's drawn to those types of personalities and the followers of a cult.
Mm-hmm.
What induces that kind of blindness in someone? Why is the follower of a cult leader, why are they so weak?
That's an interesting choice of words. So I think that it is very common as humans to want to feel certainty, to want to feel solid ground under our feet. And here's somebody that promises you both of those things. We are very uncomfortable with groundlessness, with uncertainty, with not knowing. I mean, that's why psychics make so much money. They can charge $100 an hour to give you whatever.
Right.
Because we want to know, right? We feel safety in that. And we have really been challenged as a species to embrace that groundlessness. And so I don't know that I would necessarily say that they're weak, but they're very uncomfortable with that uncertainty. And that can be a practice too. And we can start teaching children very young to be okay with that groundlessness, with that uncertainty, with that unknowing. And maybe it is anchored on something bigger like love instead of fear.
Right. And again, you're the doctor and you know best, but I would have to say I disagree with the weakness thing. I think that I really do believe. I think that if you're looking for that grounding, there's so many other ways to find it.
Yeah, there are healthier ways.
Right.
I would say unhealthy instead of but you can say weak. It's totally fine.
Okay.
This is technically your show.
No, but that's why I have you on. You're the expert.
Yeah, no, I think
so.
that there are much healthier ways.
Right.
And just being okay with not knowing is in of itself a very huge practice.
Right. How early in life can we first spot these types of behaviors in children? And do we look for them?
Right. So the antisocial personality disorder, one of the criteria is that it actually shows up young.
Okay.
With narcissism, sometimes that's diagnosed later. Sometimes it's never even diagnosed.
Right.
And sometimes it's very much misdiagnosed by your ex. So again, when we look at the ages, sometimes the severity helps determine that. So something like bipolar disorder, if it can show up younger and be diagnosed younger. What we do know is that because we are not well equipped with information, there's usually a delay from the onset of symptoms to the actual diagnoses. Some of them, like the schizophrenia that we were mentioning, shows up later in life. So we know that that's more 20s for men, 30s for women.
Right.
So there are different ages that these things are typically diagnosed. If you have a child that is cruel to animals, that's a huge flag for antisocial personality disorder. So there are things that we can spot, but usually the diagnosis comes after we've accumulated enough data on the child or experience.
Right. So the very first time that a child harms the pet in the house, should they seek help? That family immediately seek help?
I mean, it depends on the severity. Did they put gasoline on it?
Right.
But I think kids don't know those boundaries inherently.
Right.
So if you've ever been around a 2-year-old and a dog, I don't know why they make those puppy kid calendars, because that is not a pleasant experience. Kids poke, they pull, they're testing those boundaries.
They pet too hard.
They pet too hard,
right.
right.
Yeah, right.
But those are all learning opportunities.
Right.
Those are all things where you can say, how does the dog feel about that? Let's look at the cues. What message is it sending you? Here's how we use soft hands. This is why it's important. And so I don't know that we need to be so hypervigilant that we're trying to diagnose everybody or get them in for therapy.
Right.
But I think that if you look at every single action as an opportunity for building that internal locus of control where they are responsible for their emotions and for their actions and for noticing the consequences and the impact on those around, it's never ending. I mean, even with ourselves, that's got to be a practice we continue, right?
Right. Okay. And I want to go to schizophrenia for a second, and I felt almost I felt bad for lumping it in with the conversation of being a narcissist or a sociopath, because it's not the same at all.
Yes.
And it is something that is treatable, and persons with schizophrenia suffer from a real disease, as I put it, a real mental disorder that can be treated, whereas I think that these borderline personality and all of that's almost a poke in the eye type of,
I mean, they all really suffer, so they're real in that sense. But yeah, when we look at it, it is very common because we don't have these conversations very often, just sort of lump everybody together.
Right.
And one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is we were talking more about mental health in general.
Right.
And so it is very different to talk about somebody with an anxiety disorder versus schizophrenia, bipolar, narcissism, but just opening the conversations where we're willing and we don't have it rooted in fear, but more compassion. How do we show up with more kindness for people that are suffering from any of these things? Because there is a lot of suffering with the individual and the family typically.
Right. And one last thing on schizophrenia. Why can't that age, the 20-year-old, usually for males, you said, and then 20 to 30 for females? Does it take that long to develop within them, or take that long to identify?
Usually, there's not a ton of symptoms before, so I wouldn't necessarily say like it's a continuous development where all of a sudden it explodes, but. It has to do with the physiology, the anatomy, the huge transitions that usually happen around those times. And it was explained to me by my Psychology 101 professor so brilliantly that even though it was a million years ago, I still remember it. Basically, what she said was that if you picture a crystal, it has different points or cleavages on the crystal that are fragile, that if you tap it ever so slightly on that cleavage, the whole crystal shatters, right? Humans are a lot like that. So you can think about our genetics, our neurotransmitters, all of that as being the crystal and the cleavages. We might have the exact same makeup as somebody next to us, and they go through their whole life never getting tapped in that particular cleavage that shatters them.
Right.
And even though it's the exact same, the other person goes through their entire life and maybe they have that predisposition for schizophrenia. It just never gets tapped right. And some people have a lot more, some people have a lot less, but that's a really good way to look at it because it is so complex. We can't just say, it's been developing their whole time and now they're 20, it happens. It might be that that's when they go and they move away to college and all of these things trigger all of the things that are already inherent that make it so that happens.
Brilliantly explained.
Right? I had a really great professor.
My God, thank you. And last question, and I there's no other way to frame it. I don't mean to frame this in a political sense or a personal view type of sense, but when you see former President Donald Trump, and when you hear what he says and how he behaves, does he suffer from one or more of the conditions that we've spoken about?
So, since I'm not his doctor,
right?
I thank goodness I will not be responsible for diagnosing him. But what I do think that we can take from the behavior of any of the politicians that are running is this opportunity for us to practice that compassion, that kindness. And some people, it is a heavier weight to lift, right? So it's more of a mental workout to dig deep and find that compassion. And, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump likes soup. So I think that there is always a way for us to turn it back in, to have that internal locus control and to really practice our own mental health and well-being. I am certain that Donald Trump and most people could get a diagnosis if we were picked at long enough, right?
Right.
So is that a way of totally not answering you?
Yeah, I'm like, I've seen people dance with a question before, but this was a good dance right there.
Yeah. Even with my hurt leg, that was quite the dance. But I do think that, there are characteristics. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual's a great place if you want to make your own personal assessment. I personally think that more damage is done in trying to diagnose other people unless we're part of their treatment plan, unless we're part of their support team. And so rather than saying, there's a narcissist, saying there's a human probably will serve us all a lot better in the long run.
Right. There's a strange dissatisfaction in that answer.
Strange. That is not what you wanted.
Well, no. It is. I understand though, because you're a professor. I get it. I understand why that answer is. Melissa Harris is a professor of psychology. We are delighted that she's here with us once a month. to talk about all things important. And today, I really appreciate your indulgence on the subject matter today. Tell us about Juniper Consulting Lab and what you're intending to do here in the next month, 2-3 months. What's going on?
Yeah, so the lab here in Laguna Beach, we have been doing community meditations. I think because tomorrow is the Tuesday of election, we actually have a huge wait list for the meditation. I think people are looking for that tomorrow. But we're going to continue with that. And then we're also expanding our online services. Juniper Consulting is myself, and I focus on the happiness part. We have Jennifer Rowe, who is a counselor, a therapist, and she does more traditional therapy and EMDR. And then we have Molly Behunin, who is a hypnotherapist. She works a lot with Ayurvedic nutrition, and she's an Ayurvedic practitioner. She's all around a badass. And so we have a pretty good team that can address a whole range of people's needs to be healthier and happier and live a more meaningful life. So it's not just Laguna Beach that we are focusing on now. We are trying to expand out and really make our content available to people all around the world.
Right. And the conversation that we have is available to people around the world as well. And much like you help me understand things, you help the rest of our listening audience understand. And I am so grateful for that. Thank you so very much.
I'm so grateful that you have me here.
Okay. Dr. Professor Melissa Harris, thank you so very much. We will look forward to speaking with you again. And great meditation tomorrow for you.
Thank you.
10:35 the time, 25 before 11. It's the Mornings with Ed show on the all-new Voice of Laguna.
The Mornings with Ed show. We'll be back after this.
Power your adventure with the all-electric 2024 Subaru Solterra. It has the rugged versatility of standard symmetrical all-wheel drive and 8.3 inches of ground clearance. It's the most advanced Subaru ever, with our latest safety technology and zero emissions.